shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Here's today's prophecy update. In this age of fake news, how can we know what the truth is? One network places one slant on the news, while another network tells an opposite story. In a time 2,000 years ago, but very much like the present, Governor Pontius Pilate cynically asked, "What is truth?" Yet, Jesus Christ boldly promised, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free." So, how can we know the truth? Jesus said we should search the Scriptures. The Bible has proven to be a reliable source of truth for 2,000 years, and it still is today. Stay tuned for another important session of End of the Age. Well, before we dive into our lesson today, and this is going to be a really important one, so don't go away, I first of all want to tell you about a prophecy conference I will be holding, actually two of them, this weekend in Michigan. I'll be in Plymouth, Michigan on Saturday evening, February the 24th, and I'll be speaking on Trump, Jerusalem, and Armageddon. Now, this is a brand new presentation. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be February the 24th, 6 p.m. And then I will also be there on Sunday morning. But the location is the Rock Church in Plymouth, 1100 West Ann Arbor Trail, Plymouth, Michigan. On Sunday morning, it will be 10:30 a.m., and I'll be speaking on breaking prophetic fulfillments. Now, there's a lot happening in our world right now that everybody needs to know. So whatever you do, if you're any place close to these two conferences, Saturday night, Sunday morning, make it a point to come out right now. So it's going to be Trump, Jerusalem, Armageddon on Saturday evening, and then breaking prophetic fulfillments with a question and answer session to follow on Sunday morning. It's going to be exciting. Then on Sunday evening, I'll be in Albion, Michigan, and I'll be speaking there on America's God-given destiny. That's at 6 p.m. on February the 25th. The location, Christ Apostolic Church, 503 North Superior Street, Albion, Michigan. For both of these conferences, be there if you possibly can. Of course, America's God-given destiny is so critical right now. We're going to be talking about America in the Bible, America's future foretold in the Bible. Will America join the one world government? Will America be under the mark of the beast? Will America forsake Israel before it's all over with? All those questions will be answered in this critical session in Albion. Okay, well, we're talking about what's the truth? I guess the reason that I felt to bring this to you today is because I watched two speeches yesterday at the United Nations. Mahmoud Abbas appeared at the UN Security Council. He had specifically requested the time. And then Danny Danon, the ambassador to the UN from Israel, countered with a follow-up speech. And it's like you were listening to two different worlds. It was almost like listening to one liberal media and then a conservative media. And it's like nothing matched. What one calls good, the other calls evil. Let me give you some examples. Now, what are we talking about today? Can we know the truth? How do we know what's going on in our world right now? There are many things that shape my worldview because I know the prophecies of the Bible. And when people are saying this is going to happen or that's going to happen or this is going to turn out or that's not, if the Bible prophesies it, we already know what's going to happen because the Bible's prophecies are never wrong. They always come to pass as long as we properly understand them. So when you talk about trying to form a basis for belief for your life, if you do not know your Bible, you're going to really be in trouble because there's so many voices today. There's so much fake news, and sometimes it's fake on both sides. And then sometimes it may not be fake, but it just may be in error. Well, let me take you to the speech of Mahmoud Abbas. Of course, he was there. He's frustrated because America made the decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem. And he feels like that was a huge blow to the Palestinian cause because they claim they have to have Jerusalem for their capital. Now, I'll remind you, it's never been their capital one time, but they say we've got to have it. Why? Because we've got to have it. Why? It's never been your capital before. Well, we know, but we've got to have it. Now, if you know your Bible, you know why they're doing this. But the rest of the world shrugs and says, well, I guess they have to have it. But we're going to tell you a whole lot more as soon as we get back.
We live in critical times. If the final 7 years started today, would you know what to do? God's people need to understand the prophecies that are taking place. Daniel 11:33 says, "And they that understand among the people shall instruct many." To guide the people around us, we must first receive instruction ourselves on the biblical prophecies of the end time. End Time Ministries is introducing the End Time 1000. We have created Jerusalem Prophecy College online to help you be ready to inform those around you. The goal is to have at least 1,000 people prepared to instruct others. By joining the End Time 1000, you can fulfill Daniel 11:33. Sign up for Jerusalem Prophecy College online and be equipped to guide your friends and loved ones during the final 7 years. Go to JerusalemProphecyCollege.com. That's JerusalemProphecyCollege.com.
We got married in 2003. We clashed immediately. Everything seemed to be going wrong. We started following End Time Ministries, and we started going to End Time Bible studies.
About our life's never been the same. It's just been so powerful and so great, and God has done such a mighty work that saved my life, and it saved my soul for eternity.
God did use this ministry to literally bring us to Him and make the old man pass away and the new man come to life.
Thank you for giving to End Time Ministries.
Offering hope to people like us.
With every dollar, you change lives and provide hope for people just like Mark and Adrian. Thank you for giving to End Time Ministries.
Now, on the Palestinian side, I have been stunned at the lies that they can tell. For example, when President Clinton and Ehud Barak were negotiating with Yasser Arafat in Camp David in the year 2000, whenever they came to the Temple Mount, President Clinton was trying to put a deal together, and he thought he about had it. They get to the Temple Mount, and he said, we can't surrender it. Barak said, wait a minute. You've got your first holy site in Mecca. You've got your second holy site in Medina. This is only your third holy site. We Jews don't even have our first holy site. Arafat looked at him and said, there never was a temple there. And Clinton said, well, the Bible says there was a temple there. And Arafat looked at him and said, there never was a temple there. And Clinton said, what about the Bible? And Arafat said, there never was a temple there. Then Clinton said, well, it says in the Bible that Jesus taught in the temple. And Arafat said, there never was a temple there. Well, that's when Bill Clinton realized that he was against a brick wall, out of touch with the reality, that made things up and taught their people to believe things that simply were not true. That's just one example. Now, in this speech made before the United Nations yesterday, you're going to hear some things very similar to that. For instance, Mahmoud Abbas said, we are the descendants of the Canaanites that lived in the land of Palestine 5,000 years ago and continuously remain there to this day. Now remember, he's an Arab. The Palestinians are Arabs. And yet now then they're claiming to be descendants of the Canaanites. Why are they doing this? Well, because the word Palestinian has only been used for a people since about 1964. So he's got to try to go back and establish legitimacy before this, because everybody knows that Israel was in this land for 1,000 years before Christ. And they have a history there way back to Abraham, 4,000 years ago. And if the Palestinians come along and say, oh, this is our land, but we've only existed as a people for 70 years or so, well, that's a real problem. So now then, Abbas is saying, we are the descendants of the Canaanites, and they've lived here for 5,000 years. Now, he went on to say, all of this existed before and after the Balfour Declaration issued by the British government in 1917, a declaration by which those who did not own, giving to those who had no right. The British government bears responsibility for the catastrophic consequences inflicted on the Palestinian people as a result. Now, let's pause. He goes back to the Balfour Declaration of 1917. The entire area was controlled by the Ottoman Empire prior to World War I. Then the war came. Germany launched war. The Ottoman Empire went on the side of Germany. But Germany and the Ottoman Empire was defeated. As a result, Britain took control of this part of the world. It was very sparsely populated at the time. In the meantime, the Jews had been filtered through the nations for the last 1,900 years, and they were desperate for a homeland. Consequently, certain influential Jews went to the British and said, please, take this area. There's very few people living there. Designate it as a homeland for the Jews. It's our promised land. We used to live there before the Romans drove us out in 70 AD. Consequently, the Balfour Declaration was issued in 1917. It's called the Balfour Declaration because Lord Balfour was the Secretary of State of Britain at the time. And it merely said that His Majesty's government would look with favor upon the establishment of a homeland for the Jews in the area called Palestine. Why was it called Palestine? Because the Romans had called it Palestine, trying to purge it of the name of Israel because they so hated the people of Israel. Now, there's more to it than that. They also had rejected their Messiah, and this was part of the punishment. The Bible says your house will be left to you desolate. Jesus prophesied himself about that. Okay, so now then, Abbas is saying, look, we were here before the Balfour Declaration. Everybody looks at him like, do what? Are you serious? There was no such thing as Palestinians except for the people who lived in that area. The Jews were called Palestinians. The Arabs that lived there were called Palestinians. But as far as a Palestinian people, there was no such thing. And the Canaanites had not existed in the world for 3,000 years at least. So, but Abbas is making this ridiculous assertion, hey, we've been here 5,000 years. But remember, there were no Palestinians at the time of the Balfour Declaration, only Arabs. So it's a blatant lie. Moreover, Abbas said, we continue to strive to unite our people and land and to ensure one authority, one law, and one gun, and are determined to convene parliamentary and presidential elections. Now he's trying to say, we're very democratic. We love freedom. We believe in democracy. Do you realize that he was elected 12 years ago for a 4-year term? But he's conveniently ignored that fact and held no elections since then because he knows he would lose if he did hold the elections. Think about this. What would it be if there was a president elected for a 4-year term, but he just conveniently didn't call elections, and he's still in office after 12 years? That's what Mr. Abbas, he says, we believe in democracy. We intend to hold elections. But everybody's been clamoring for him to hold elections, and he won't do it. Another blatant untruth. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to you. We're living in a world. One of Satan's biggest tactics is lying. Now, there's a lot of politicians. Some people think all politicians lie. I hope not, but maybe they do. I don't know. Nevertheless, I just wanted to illustrate to you what's going on. I listened to this entire speech, and knowing this part of the world and knowing its history so well, my mouth dropped open as I'm listening to this speech. How does this man have the audacity to stand there before educated people? Now, some of them are not educated enough because they're buying into this thing. They'll all the time refer to occupied territories. It's not occupied territories because this was part of the British mandate, and the United Nations tried to give it to the Arabs and Israelis in 1947. The Israelis accepted it, but the Arabs launched a war to try to wipe out the nation of Israel. They said, we don't want it. And then all the time, Jordan had it. Jordan controlled the whole thing from 1948 to 1967. Did they create a Palestinian state then? No, silent as the graveyard. They could have done anything they wanted to do. They could have created a Palestinian state. But Jordan had illegally occupied the area by force, trying to stamp out the Jewish nation. So the Jews fought back in order to preserve their existence. And the ceasefire line was formed in 1948-49 and extended to 1967. Okay, Abbas goes on to say, we have thus been committed to fostering a culture of peace, rejection of violence. Am I hearing that right? Pursuit of sustainable development and the building of schools, hospitals, industrial zones, agricultural farms, and technological production, as opposed to establishing weapons factories and purchasing tanks and fighter jets, for we wish for our people to live in freedom and dignity, far from wars and destruction, and far from terrorism and extremism, which are being relentlessly combated in all areas of the globe. Now, I've heard a lot about violence in Israel. The first intifada, the second intifada, the knife intifada, more recently. But yet, he says they're combating violence. Do you remember when 9/11 happened in America, when we lost 3,000 lives at the trade towers in New York? Did you see the video of the Palestinians dancing in the streets, happy because America had been hit? Well, they quickly got rid of those tapes because they didn't want you to remember those or see them, but I remember them. All right. Then Abbas says, why are we here today? Still speaking to the UN Security Council. After a long journey and efforts to create a political path based on negotiations and leading to a comprehensive and just peace, as you are aware, we participated in the Madrid Conference of 1991 and signed the Oslo Accords in 1993, which affirmed the imperative of reaching a solution of all the permanent status issues before 1999. Unfortunately, this has not become reality. Of course, this is 2018. Nevertheless, we persisted in our efforts to attain peace. We engaged in dialogue at Wye River, at Camp David. We participated in the Annapolis Conference. We engaged in dialogue with former Israeli Prime Minister Olmert and met with Prime Minister Netanyahu in the presence of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and George Mitchell. And we accepted President Putin's invitation to meet with Mr. Netanyahu in Moscow, but he has regrettably evaded participating in such a meeting. We engaged with all seriousness with former Secretary of State John Kerry, but the Israeli government's intransigence caused the failure of all of these efforts. Now, what does he mean, Israeli intransigence? That means Israel wouldn't give them everything they wanted. So that's intransigence, right? Israel said, we're not going to give up our eternal capital of Jerusalem. It's always been our capital. It's never been your capital. We're not giving it up. That's what Abbas calls intransigence. He went on to say, after all of this, how can it be said that it is we who reject negotiations? Confronted with this deadlock, we have neither given up nor have we lost hope. We have come to the United Nations, believing in the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, which affirms the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by force and affirms the right of peoples to self-determination, which are among the issues this august council will address tomorrow. We continue to engage with all of its agencies and bodies in our search for an end to this occupation of our land and our people. Now, I would remind you, this was not their land. The Jordanians, when Israel was declared a nation, May the 14th of 1948, the Jordanians and 4 other Arab nations moved in the next day, launched a war against Israel. Jordan came across the Jordan River into territory that did not belong to her. And then when the ceasefire was declared, Jordan stayed from 1948 to 1967. So Jordan was the occupier. But the Balfour Declaration had given the land to Israel. But everybody's bought into this untruth, this fake news, that Israel's the occupier. It's the opposite. Finally, Abbas says, is it logical that Israel violates its obligation to implement Resolutions 181? Now, this is so blatant, it's staggering. Because who accepted 181? Israel. Who rejected 181? The Arabs. They rejected 181, which was when the United Nations said, okay, we're going to create an Israeli state and a Palestinian state side by side. The Palestinians said, no, thank you. We want to kill the Jews. And they launched a war against Israel. They would not take what was handed to them. And they furthermore did not take a Palestinian state when Jordan controlled it from 1948 to 1967. It doesn't even seem like they want a state. I mean, they had it in the bag. So he says Israel is acting as a state above the law. Whose law is he referring to? Well, the law of the world government, of course. Since most people in the UN have now sided against Israel because anti-Semitism is rife through the nations of the world, he's saying the world government, you're violating international law. He said they've been offered independence and freedom several times, but they have rejected it. Well, actually, that was referring to the Palestinians. Then Abbas said, we met with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, 4 times in 2017, and we have expressed our absolute readiness to reach a historic peace agreement. We repeatedly reaffirmed our position in accordance with international law, the relevant UN resolutions, and the two-state solution on the basis of the 1967 borders. Yet this administration has not clarified its position. Is it for the two-state solution or for one state? And then, in a dangerous, unprecedented manner, this administration undertook an unlawful decision, which was rejected by the international community, to remove the issue of Jerusalem off the table and to recognize the city as Israel's capital and to transfer its embassy to the city. It did so ignoring that East Jerusalem is part of the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967 and is our capital, which we used to be a city open to all faithful of the 3 monotheistic religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. I mean, the untruth of this is absolutely staggering. Our capital, never, not one day, has it been the capital of the Palestinians. Yet, For the last 3,000 years, it's been recognized as the capital of Israel. From 1004 BC until 70 AD, the Jews lived there. That is their capital with their temple on the Temple Mount. Then the Romans came and burnt the temple to the ground, drove them out, and they've been looking toward Jerusalem for the last 2,000 years, praying next year in Jerusalem. Okay, so Jordan took East Jerusalem by war in 1948 and lost it by war when Jordan attacked Israel in 1967. Now, Abbas went on to say, the outcomes of this conference should be as follows: acceptance of the state of Palestine as a full member of the United Nations and a call on the Security Council to achieve that, taking into account General Assembly Resolution 6719 of November the 29th of 2012, and guaranteeing international protection for our people. Now, that's not going to happen because the U.S. has veto power at the UN Security Council. The Palestinians are not going to be admitted as a full member of the United Nations unless there's a peace agreement. We know there is going to be a peace agreement, so they may well be recognized before it's over with. Then Resolution 6719 did recognize Palestine as a non-member state because that was voted on by the General Assembly, where the United States has no veto power. He says we also need mutual recognition between the state of Palestine and the state of Israel on the basis of the 1967 borders. Foremost must be the cessation of settlement activities in the territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, and suspension of the decision regarding Jerusalem and halting transfer of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in compliance with the relevant Security Council resolutions, including in particular Resolutions 476. Well, he went on and on and on and on, and I know my time has run out in this segment. But if you get to stay with us for the next segment, I'm going to continue because all this is so important. How can you know the truth? Search the scriptures, and then you think you have eternal life. These are they that testify of me.
Israel, there is no other place like it on the face of the earth. Over 4,000 years ago, God gave this land to Abraham and his seed and said that he would put his name in Jerusalem. The world watches as this tiny nation stands in spite of all the obstacles. Irvin and Judy, along with the End Time team, would like to invite you to travel with us to the Holy Land. This trip will be a wonderful and life-changing experience. Our Spring End Time Prophecy Tour will have the privilege of being the first End Time tour to visit Jerusalem as the recognized capital of Israel. Some of the highlights will be the Mount of Olives, the Temple Mount, the Tomb of Jesus, the boat ride on the Sea of Galilee, the baptisms in the Jordan River, and we will also visit Petra in Jordan. If you would like to experience the Bible in full color, join us April 26th through May 11th, 2018. Call 1-800-END-TIME, that's 1-800-363-8463, and press 2, or go to endtime.com/Israel Tour to receive your information today.
Do you believe we're living in the end times? If so, what's the one magazine you should subscribe to? End Time is the magazine designed to guide you through the end times. Irvin highly recommends End Time magazine so you can stay informed with what's going on in the news and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Call 1-800-363-8463 and get End Time magazine for 2 years for only $29. Call 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com to take advantage of this special offer.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
I'm always filled with a level of awe when I attend a meeting at the United Nations, either physically myself or by way of video, because I know I'm looking at the one world governmental structure that will ultimately be ruled over by the Antichrist in the end time. There's no doubt about it. The United Nations is going to end up being the one world government of the Antichrist himself. So it always fills me with a lot of awe. And here we are at the United Nations, and Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinians. By the way, do you know that the word Palestinian and Philistine is the same word? Do you realize that? It's pretty amazing. And we know who the enemies of Israel were all through the Bible, always. Always the Philistines, the Philistines, the Philistines. So if Arafat wanted to claim any heritage at all, he should claim the Philistines. Actually, Yasser Arafat did that. Somebody asked him, so are you a Philistine? He said, absolutely. So here what we really have is David versus Goliath. Well, I want to continue on now because there's too much to this. I don't want to leave you hanging. We're toward the conclusion of Mahmoud Abbas's speech at the United Nations yesterday. He said, when we get together for this international conference, which I am proposing, we should discuss the preservation of the principle of the two states, the state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side with the state of Israel in peace and security on the basis of the June 4th, 1967 borders and rejection of partial solutions and a state of provisional borders. Now, did you notice just before our last break that he also said that Jews, Muslims, and Christians should be able to freely access Jerusalem? Did he say, though, that Jews would be able to pray on the Temple Mount or Christians to pray on the Temple Mount? You go to try to do it today, you'll get yourself arrested. I go there twice a year, and you don't dare pray on the Temple Mount. They'll sweep you, they'll take you right to jail. And so if he says Jews, Christians, and Muslims should be able to worship there freely, he doesn't mean that, because they certainly could already do that right now, but they will not do that. Nevertheless, he went on to propose acceptance of minimal land swaps in equal value and ratio with the agreement between the two parties. East Jerusalem is the capital of the state of Palestine and an open city for the faithful of the three monotheistic religions. Again, there he says it, an open city so that all three of the monotheistic religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, can pray there. Does that mean he's going to allow them to pray there? He sure doesn't allow them to now. Continuing on. This Security Council is the highest entity to which the peoples of the world seek sanctuary and protection. After this council, we rest our issue to the Almighty. For if justice for our people cannot be attained here, then to where should we go? Now that's Mahmoud Abbas, the chairman of the Palestinian Authority. Those were his words yesterday before the world government. And again, I don't believe in world government. I don't believe the United States should recognize a world government. I do not believe that Israel should bow to a world government. It's the last thing we need is a one world government, because when you have world government, all the nation states lose their independence, and we have a Declaration of Independence that we hold close and dear. Now, Danny Danon, who is the ambassador from Israel to the United Nations, he was given the microphone next. He stated, it is unfortunate that we are meeting here today. For the past 7.5 years, the chairman of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, has refused to meet even once with Prime Minister Netanyahu. He has refused to negotiate peace. Yet during that same time, Mr. Abbas has made 7 trips here to the United Nations. Today, once again, rather than driving just 12 minutes from Ramallah to Jerusalem, he has chosen to fly 12 hours to New York to avoid the possibility for peace. Mr. Abbas, you just addressed the members of the Security Council and spoke of your commitments to peace. This is what you often do in speaking to international forums. But when you address your people in Arabic, you convey a very different message. I want to pause right there to tell you that as soon as Abbas finished his speech, he whirled and left the building. He did not want to stay and hear what Danny Danon had to say. Now, Denon continues. A few weeks ago, when you spoke to the PLO Central Committee, you called the national movement of the Jewish people, and I quote, colonialist project that has no connection to Judaism. In September 2015, as part of your attempts to delegitimize the connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel, you said that Jews had no rights to the Temple Mount and other holy sites. And that Jews, and I quote, desecrate the holy sites with their filthy feet. Now, Abbas has just been speaking, trying to put himself forward as a peace lover. But the problem is when he speaks in Arabic to his own people, it's a totally different story. And people get a hold of these recordings, translate them into English so we can all hear them. And now all of a sudden, these statements that Abbas makes come back to bite him. Denon said, you then went on to incite your people to violence, saying, and I quote, we welcome every drop of blood spilled in Jerusalem. Mr. Abbas, you inspire a culture of hate within Palestinian society. You name schools and public squares in honor of terrorists. If you kill a Jew as a Palestinian, they will name streets after you. They will honor you. He goes on to say, Denon speaking, you encourage your children to hate by teaching them in school that Jews are descendants of apes. Just this month, your Fatah faction praised the terrorist who killed Rabbi Raziel Shawak, and you remain silent and refuse to condemn the terrorist who killed a father of 6 as he was driving home to see his children. Mr. Abbas, your incitement does not end with rhetoric. You have made it official Palestinian policy to sponsor terrorism. In 2017, you spent $345 million paying terrorists for killing innocent Israelis. That is 50% of total foreign aid donated to the Palestinian Authority. I want to pause right there. If a terrorist kills a Jew and they're put into Israeli prisons, then they support that terrorist and his entire family. They put them on welfare or governmental support. Who's supplying the money? The nations of the world, because the Palestinians don't have any money. They spend all their money on terrorism, building tunnels to invade Israel. Now, I'm just telling you the truth. $345 million. The United States gave $730 million to the Palestinians last year. And they took $345 million of that to support people who have killed Jews. It almost makes my mind explode when I think about this, that American tax dollars are being used in this perverted way. Now, all of a sudden, President Trump is saying, not anymore. And he just cut off $65 million a year that normally would go to UNRWA, which is the relief agency of the United Nations, which goes to support all of these Palestinians that are still in refugee camps after 70 years. When they could be out working, holding jobs. There's plenty of Arab nations for them to live in. But of course they don't want to do that because that would surrender their best political football. Continuing. This is money you could have spent building 40 hospitals, $345 million. 40 hospitals in a year you could have built. This is money you could have used to build 172 schools every year. We recently celebrated 70 years since the adoption of General Assembly Resolution 181. That's where the Jewish state was created. That's where the United Nations tried to create the Palestinian state, but they said no thank you. He said, for the Jewish people, it represented international recognition of our historic rights to our homeland. We accepted the resolution immediately. It was not perfect. It did not provide us with all that we deserved, but it gave us hope for a better future. Yet this past November, as Israel celebrated this milestone, the Palestinians marked this anniversary with grief and mourning, just as they did 70 years ago when they chose to reject it. Actually, the Palestinians call it Nakba Day, which means catastrophe day. That was the catastrophe when the Jewish state was created by the United Nations. They claim they want a state. They also tried to hand them a state, but they rejected it out of hand. Over time, brave leaders emerged in Egypt and Jordan, leaders who were willing to negotiate, compromise, and ultimately sign peace agreements with Israel. But the Palestinian leadership continued to choose conflict over coexistence. At the Camp David summit in 2000, Prime Minister Ehud Barak presented the Palestinians with an unprecedented offer. What was Mahmoud Abbas's reaction? To side with Yasser Arafat's claim it was a trap and reject the proposal. Since the day he took office, peace plan after peace plan has been accepted by Israel and rejected by Mr. Abbas. Israeli leaders have sat with Mr. Abbas time and again. 3 different Israeli prime ministers, 3 different American presidents. But every time there is an inch toward progress, Mr. Abbas runs away. In 2007, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert offered the most generous deal since Resolution 181, an almost complete withdrawal from Judea and Samaria, and a direct link to the Gaza Strip. The offer even included a plan to place the old city of Jerusalem, the gateway to our holiest sites, under international control. Mr. Abbas's response was simple, an unequivocal no. 2 years later, Prime Minister Netanyahu did something unprecedented. In an attempt to restart negotiations, he initiated a 10-month freeze on Jewish construction in Judea and Samaria. This was a precondition that no Israeli prime minister, not even Yitzhak Rabin or Shimon Peres, had ever agreed to. But soon enough, the 10 months passed, and Mahmoud Abbas was nowhere to be found. He actually came to the table for 1 week. The 10 months was just about expired. He came to the table, sat down, and said, "We're here now. But of course, we will expect you to continue the settlement freeze." Netanyahu said, "We're ready to talk, but we're not going to continue the freeze. We've been sitting here waiting for you for 10 months, and you just show up the last minute, and you're trying to trick us into continuing this freeze. Not going to do that." Abbas got up and walked out. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit more before we're finished. But we're talking today about the speeches at the UN yesterday, trying to influence the leaders that are there one way and then the other. What is truth? What is not truth? So important in the world in which we live today.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter, the new book by Irvin's grandson, provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your connection to God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at End Time will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Order this brand new book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
Turn your scriptures from black and white into color. Experience the footsteps of Jesus. Understand Bible prophecy that is coming to pass right now. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter and the End Time team this spring 2018 for a life-changing trip to Israel and Jordan. Mark your calendar for April 26th through May 11th for this amazing journey. Call 1-800-END-TIME, that's 1-800-363-8463 and press 2, or go to endtime.com/Israel-tour to receive your information today.
Concluding the speech of Danny Danon before the United Nations Security Council yesterday, he continued to say in 2013, Secretary of State John Kerry opened another attempt at negotiations. Once again, Prime Minister Netanyahu was ready to talk. Once again, he was ready to negotiate despite the years of Palestinian rejections of peace. Let me pause right there. Abbas would not meet Netanyahu face to face. They had to be in one room, Netanyahu in another room with an intermediary between. That's the way they tried to conduct it because Abbas wanted nothing to do with Netanyahu. So Chairman Abbas, he's at these peace talks, and they lasted for about 8 months. Kerry said, give me 9 months. And so they were there, and Kerry was pushing with all of his might. Chairman Abbas responded by breaking his commitment to Secretary Kerry. He chose unilateral action by joining international conventions. He had committed. Neither side shall try to prejudice these talks by going out and joining international conventions, but he did anyway. Then he sought peace with Hamas that is officially recognized as a terrorist organization. He made a deal with Hamas, the revolutionary, recognized terrorist organization, without even demanding that it renounce violence. Danan went on to say, Mr. Abbas, let me be clear. For thousands of years, Jerusalem has been the heart and soul of our people. Jerusalem has been our capital since the days of King David, and Jerusalem will remain the undivided capital of the state of Israel forever. Israelis are an optimistic people. We weathered 4 bloody wars with Egypt while waiting for a leader like Anwar Sadat to courageously visit Jerusalem. It took decades of talks with Jordan until the time was right for King Hussein to enter into what he rightly called a peace of the brave. 3 times a day, Jews in Israel and all over the world turn to Jerusalem and pray for peace. We ask the following from God. Grant peace everywhere, goodness and blessing, grace, loving kindness, and mercy to us, and unto all Israel and all of the world. We have no doubt that the day will come when the Palestinian people will also be blessed with leadership that shares these noble aspirations. This will be a leadership that condemns violence and ends the shameful practice of paying salaries to terrorists. It will be a leadership that educates its people to tolerance instead of peddling in anti-Semitism. It will be a leadership that recognizes that Israel is and always will be the national homeland of the Jewish people. Israel eagerly awaits the day when this Palestinian leadership will emerge and will bring the hope of a better future for its people and for our region. Wow. Now, that's what you missed if you didn't tune in to the UN yesterday. There's a whole lot more. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, made a powerful and impressive speech. There were probably 15 different speeches made after that. Everyone talking about what they thought about the Israeli-Palestinian standoff. But of course, they've all been there before. There's been UN meeting after UN meeting after UN meeting. All right, where's it all going to end? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you, because the Bible tells us. Will there be a peace agreement? Yes, there will be. But it will not be a permanent agreement, sorry to say, because they're going to get everything worked out except one issue. It's the thorn in the side, the status of Jerusalem, the place where God said many times in the Old Testament, I will put my name there. So over and over again, they've tried the peace deal. They're going to get it done. I do not know whether it will happen under the watch of President Trump or whether it will happen later. I know that President Trump has a peace plan that he's almost finished with. The peace representatives from the United States, Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt and Nikki Haley, fielded questions from the United Nations for 1 hour after all the speeches were done. And they said, the peace plan we have, the Palestinians will love some of it, they will hate some of it. The Jews will love some of it, they will hate some of it. It's going to call for some painful compromises on both sides. Now, France is calling for the United States to go ahead and release that peace plan. I wouldn't be surprised, but what it doesn't happen pretty quickly now. Then Mahmoud Abbas will have to decide, does he accept or does he reject what will happen? I don't know what's going to happen there. I do know this, though. There is going to be a peace agreement. The Bible says there's going to be a peace agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And the Bible also says that when that peace agreement is signed, the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the return of Jesus to this earth will begin. That's just ahead, ladies and gentlemen. It makes my hair stand on end when I think about a prophesied event that the Bible specifically states will mark the beginning of the final 7 years. It is going to be so exciting when we know the day that that agreement is signed, but they will not settle the status of Jerusalem. They're not going to be able to get agreement on that one. So they're going to put that off for apparently 7 years. Everything else is going to be implemented. There will be a Palestinian state. The Temple Mount will be placed under a sharing arrangement. The way will be cleared for the Jews to build their temple on the Temple Mount and to worship there. While the Muslims also worship there, the Jews will build their temple without disturbing the Dome of the Rock or the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So it's going to be this huge compromise on both sides. But Jerusalem still won't be settled. Well, I can tell you a whole lot more, and we will later. But I wanted to bring you up to date because isn't it great? Here we sit, and even Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt doesn't know how this is going to turn out. Our ambassador, Nikki Haley, does not know how this is going to turn out. But you know how it's going to turn out because the Bible tells us that there's going to be a peace agreement, that a Palestinian state will be created, and that event will mark the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon. So it's going to look wonderful. They're going to rejoice. They're going to give out Nobel Peace Prizes. But it'll soon turn to ashes as we get to the end of the interim period, the 7-year period. And then the Palestinians once again clamor for the United Nations to deliver on Jerusalem. And the UN is going to try. They're going to invade Jerusalem at the Battle of Armageddon. Zechariah 14:2 says, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. So all the nations are going to come down to try to enforce the Palestinian claim on East Jerusalem. That's going to be the Battle of Armageddon. And the city of Jerusalem, half of Jerusalem will fall to the world government armies. And when the other half is in danger, the Bible says, then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. It's all coming down. And I was listening to all this yesterday, and every single thing was said. It just fit right into the biblical narrative. Everything fit perfectly. So, knowing this truth, what are we doing about it? I'll tell you here at End Time Ministries, we are mobilizing with all of our might. Many of you helped us to get a software we desperately needed to serve God to the maximum for the next 7, 8, 9 years, however much time we have left. We're getting geared up for that. We also have made plans to mail a magazine to every single home in Israel. The month they sign this agreement, it's going to say, warning, final 7 years to Armageddon just began. What to do? See inside. We've already got it planned because this is going to be the biggest prophetic fulfillment in the last 2,000 years. We're getting ready right now. We've got the Jerusalem Prophecy College. Right now, we've got over 970 people enrolled. Our goal is 1,000. I hope we end up going to 2,000 or 3,000, training people who can fulfill the scripture. The people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits, and they that understand among the people shall instruct many. If you haven't signed up for the Jerusalem Prophecy College yet, get busy. We need you. We need you to be skilled and equipped. Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. If you want to be part of the End Time 1,000, that's going to be ready to be a strike force for Jesus Christ in this final 7 years, to go on social media, write letters to the editor. If you want to be one of those, I'm urging you to sign up. Simply go to JerusalemProphecyCollege.com and then register and then enroll in the first semester. There's 11 semesters total. Now, there's a small charge, and when I say small, I mean ridiculously small. $50 per semester. That's just simply to cover the cost of running the college. We made it as low as we could. Some colleges you would pay $40,000 a semester. I heard recently that One basketball player, his parents paid $30,000 to send him to kindergarten, to a very high-class kindergarten. I was stunned at that. Anyway, $50 per semester is all it takes. Anybody can do it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, JerusalemProphecyCollege.com. Get started. We got to get ready. Now, I can't tell you, could this happen yet this year? You better believe it could. I'm not predicting that. I don't know. But I can tell you irrevocably, it is going to happen. It's prophesied in the Bible. The prophecies always come to pass. Now, there's one more thing I want to launch today. In order to get ready here, I asked our staff, okay, are we going to be ready? They said, we got one big problem. All of our physical computers, all of our servers are terribly out of date. And with this new donor direct system we're putting on it, it's a shame to put that on old computers that soon won't even be able to be updated. Well, I said, what can we do? They said, there's only one thing to do, and that's to ask our partners. So I'm going to. And I'm being very transparent with you. Here's what we need. We need 508 people that would donate $500. If you would be willing to do that, I'm telling you, we're getting ready for this final 7 years, and I know you're relying on us to keep you informed. In order for our infrastructure, you've heard President Trump talk about infrastructure and how important it is. Well, in order for our infrastructure here at End Time to be ready to serve you and the world, we need this upgrade in all of our IT solutions here, because all of them are at least 10 years old, and in computer age, that's old. So if you would like to help, we need 508 people that would contribute $500 each to update End Time's infrastructure so that we can be ready to go. I pray that God will just give us this quickly. Not one penny is going to go to any individual, I promise you. This is all to prepare End Time for the dash to the finish line. So if you can do that, if you can't do it, pray for us. That's all I can say to you. But if God's blessed you where you could do it, I'm urging you to call us right now. The number to call is 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Or you can go to our website, endtime.com. Now, if you want to do more than 500 and get us there quicker, that would be great. Some of you may want to do a lot more than that. Of course, it would be welcome. But I believe there's 508 people out there that could contribute $500, and it would meet our need, and we would be ready to race the rapture to the end time. I'm getting nervous. I keep hearing these speeches at the United Nations and President Trump and everything else that's going on. So if help us if you can. I really appreciate it. You've been so wonderful. Thank you. One more time, the number 1-800-END-TIME, 1-800-363-8463.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.